Gas met Amelia Hayes not at the altar, but as she, radiant in ivory, rushed to embrace a supposed vagrant at her own wedding. For 6 years, her secret pre-dawn ritual, a warm pastry, a coffee, a quiet acknowledgement, had been a lifeline for the silent man on the park bench. Unbeknownst to her, this daily act of unjudging kindness was more than charity. It was an unconscious salute to an unsung hero. Now, as the church doors dramatically parted for 12 uniformed Marines, the profound truth behind her simple offerings and the true measure of the man everyone dismissed would stun them all. This is the story of how the smallest gesture can unveil the greatest valor, and how truly seeing one person can illuminate an entire world hidden in plain sight. The whisper, sharp as a shard of broken glass in the expectant hush, sliced through the pre-ceremony hum of St. Michael's Church. "A vagrant," someone uttered, the word coded in a distaste so profound it seemed to curdle the very air, making Amelia Hayes' stomach clench, even through the comforting layers of ivory silk and intricate Chantilly lace that comprised her wedding gown. From the bridal chamber's heavy oak door, left slightly ajar by a flustered bridesmaid, she saw him, the man from the bus stop bench, a familiar fixture in the landscape of her pre-dawn world, now standing with a heartbreaking uncertainty near the grand church entrance. He clutched a worn, flat newsboy cap in his hands, twisting its brim. He was cleaner than she'd ever witnessed, his threadbare dark suit surprisingly well-pressed, a testament to a desperate effort. His shock of silver hair, usually an untamed halo, was combed neatly, revealing more of the weathered terrain of his face. But to the assembly of polished guests adorned in their Sunday best and radiating an air of celebratory affluence, he was an anomaly, a discordant note in their meticulously orchestrated symphony of joy. A ripple of discomfort, visible as averted gazes and subtly stiffened shoulders, spread through the arriving congregation. Ushers, smart in their rented tuxedos, exchanged nervous, questioning glances, their practiced smiles faltering. Mia's heart, already a frantic hummingbird thrumming against her ribs with a potent cocktail of excitement and nerves, seemed to plummet, a stone dropping into a cold, deep well. This was her doing. She had invited him. It had been a last-minute, impulsive gesture, born from a wellspring of pure, unadulterated compassion. A secret shared only with Liam, her soon-to-be husband, who understood the eccentricities of her tender heart better than anyone. Before Mrs. Albright, her formidable wedding planner, whose meticulously crafted timeline was already fraying at the edges, could deploy a diplomatic interception, or before her own mother, stationed near the vestibule, could voice the gentle, concerned disapproval Mia knew was forming on her lips. She moved. It was instinct, pure and unthinking. Gathering the voluminous cloud-like skirt of her gown in both hands, Mia swept from the bridal chamber, a sudden, breathtaking blur of white against the dark, aged wood of the church foyer. Gasps, like small, surprised explosions, followed in her wake. "Amelia, the processional! Your cue!" Mrs. Albright yelped, her voice tight with a rising tide of professional panic, the clipboard in her hand trembling. Mia barely registered the frantic call. Her focus was singular, a laser beam cutting through the ambient noise and confusion. The elderly man. His tired, deep-set eyes, the color of a stormy sea, widened, first in stark confusion, then in a dawning, hesitant, almost fearful recognition. He looked, for a terrifying moment, as though he might turn and bolt into the anonymity of the city streets. "You came," Mia breathed, her voice surprisingly steady as she reached him. Her hands, encased in delicate lace gloves, found his. They were rougher than she'd imagined, calloused and weathered by time and hardship. Yet there was an unexpected steadiness in their return grip. She squeezed them gently, offering a reassurance she hoped he could feel. "I'm so glad you came." He swallowed, a prominent movement in his thin throat. His gaze dropped to their joined hands, a small marvel of pristine lace against hardened skin, then lifted slowly back to her face. A flicker of something unreadable. Pain, gratitude, sheer bewilderment moved in their depths. I wouldn't have missed it, Miss Hayes," he managed, his voice gravelly, raspy from disuse, yet imbued with a quiet, unshakable dignity that most people, in their haste and judgment, never bothered to discern. "Not for anything in this world." "Please," she urged, a radiant, genuine smile breaking through her own pre-wedding jitters, a smile that reached her eyes and warmed the space between them. "Everyone calls me Mia." It was in that precise moment, as she prepared to link her arm through his, her intention to personally escort him to a seat of honor, defying protocol and horrified gasps, that the heavy, ancient oak doors of St. Michael's swung inward. They moved not with a creak or a groan, but with a disciplined, almost percussive force that commanded immediate attention. The hushed, scandalized conversations died instantly. Heads, adorned with fascinators and carefully coiffed hair, swiveled as one. 12 United States Marines, resplendent and imposing in their dress blue bravos, filed into the church. Their movements were a silent, powerful symphony of synchronized precision, an unspoken language forged in shared experience and unyielding discipline. White hats, gleaming like polished marble, sat squarely on their heads. Black coats, adorned with scarlet piping and burnished gold buttons, fit their athletic frames perfectly. The iconic blood-red stripe on their blue trousers was a stark, proud declaration. Their shoes, polished to a mirror shine, reflected the stained glass light like obsidian pools. White gloves, immaculate and stark, covered their hands. They were an arresting, breathtaking sight, a sudden intrusion of solemn military formality into the civilian celebration. They formed two perfect, unwavering lines, creating an impromptu honor guard that stretched from the church entrance towards the distant altar. The very air in the church seemed to crackle, charged with an unexpected, profound solemnity. Somewhere in the back pews, a champagne flute, forgotten in a guest's hand, slipped and shattered on the stone floor. The sharp, splintering sound echoed unnaturally in the sudden, absolute silence. A captain, his bearing ramrod straight, his jaw set, his nameplate glinting gold, Thorne, stepped forward from the formation. He halted precisely before Mia and the elderly man, his gaze direct and unwavering. He executed a salute, a movement so crisp, so laden with profound respect, it seemed to vibrate in the charged air, a tangible thing. "Ma'am," Captain Thorne addressed Mia, his voice clear, strong, and resonant, carrying effortlessly through the stunned, silent assembly. "On behalf of the 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, 1st Marine Division, United States Marine Corps, we are here today." He paused, allowing the weight of his presence and his words to settle. "We are here to honor a significant debt, and we are here to pay our deepest respects to the woman who, for 6 long years, unknowingly and unconditionally, sustained one of our own. A hero." Mia stared, utterly bewildered, her mind struggling to connect these imposing figures, this formal declaration, with the quiet, unassuming man whose arm she still held. Her hand tightened instinctively on his worn sleeve. Confused, hesitant murmurs, like the rustling of dry leaves, began to ripple through the wedding guests. Who was this hero? What debt could possibly be owed? Captain Thorne then turned slightly, a fractional precise movement. His gaze, respectful yet undeniably commanding, fell upon the elderly man at Mia's side, the man who, just moments before, had been the subject of scornful whispers. "And we are here," Captain Thorne continued, his voice resonating with an even deeper timbre, to finally, formally acknowledge and bring one of our own home. Sergeant Thomas Asher. It is an honor, sir. The name Thomas Asher meant nothing to Mia. Not yet. But the way the captain pronounced it, the profound reverence lacing his tone, the almost imperceptible straightening of the man beside her, a flicker of an old, deeply ingrained posture, a ghost of military bearing, sent an inexplicable shiver down her spine. The bus stop man, Sergeant Thomas Asher. The pieces began to click into place with a jarring, unbelievable resonance. Amelia Hayes' workday for the better part of a decade had begun not with the gentle persuasion of the sunrise, but in the deep, velvety blackness of the pre-dawn chill, typically around 4 a.m. By 4:30 she would be unlocking the back door of the Sunrise Hearth, the artisanal bakery in San Diego's eclectic Ocean Beach neighborhood that she had poured her youth, her passion, and countless sleepless hours into. At 32, she was the acknowledged heart and soul of the establishment, its head pastry chef, a minor local celebrity renowned for her ethereal almond croissants, constructions so delicate they shattered into 1,000 buttery, fragrant shards at the slightest touch, and her legendary cinnamon rolls, so impossibly tender, so generously glazed, they seemed to dissolve on the tongue, leaving behind a warm, lingering memory of spice, sweetness, and pure comfort. But amongst her small, tight-knit team of early-rising bakers and the bleary-eyed counter staff who stumbled in as the first hint of gray lightened the eastern sky, Mia was known for something else entirely, something more enigmatic, her unwavering, almost sacred daily ritual. This ritual commenced the very moment the first batch of pastries, golden, fragrant, and still radiating warmth, emerged from the cavernous, well-used industrial ovens. Each morning, without fail, without deviation, Mia would carefully select a perfect specimen, often a croissant, its delicate layers still puffed with steam, or one of those magnificent cinnamon rolls, its crevices pooling with melting cream cheese frosting, and meticulously wrap it in a sheet of clean wax paper. Alongside this, she'd pour a large, steaming black coffee, just the way he seemed to prefer it, strong and unadulterated, into a sturdy, insulated to-go cup. Tucked carefully beside the food and drink, there would invariably be a small, folded piece of paper, often a torn-off scrap from a notepad or the back of a recipe card, bearing a handwritten note. The messages were never elaborate. Wishing you a peaceful day, or hope this brightens your morning, or sometimes simply enjoy. Each was signed with a discreet, unassuming M. Then, mission assembled, she would slip out the bakery's less glamorous back door, a route that led her past overflowing recycling bins that clattered in the pre-dawn breeze, the metallic tang of discarded tins, and the ever-present, comforting, yeasty aroma of baking bread. Her path took her to a quiet, almost forgotten side street where, nestled near a slightly graffitied bus stop shelter, stood a weathered wooden bench. And on that bench, with a quiet reverence, she would place her offering. The recipient, for 6 uninterrupted years, was always the same. An elderly man, his most striking feature a shock of untamed, vibrant silver hair. His face, a roadmap of a life lived hard and etched with experiences Mia could only guess at, was often shadowed by the brim of his cap. He wore a tattered, multi-season coat, a garment that seemed to carry the dust and sorrows of 1,000 unseen roads, regardless of the California weather. He never begged. He never panhandled. He never approached the bakery's customers or loitered near the entrance. He simply sat, a silent, stoic sentinel, watching the world awaken from its slumber, his presence as reliable as the sunrise itself. In the entirety of those 6 years, this silent, respectful dance had unfolded. Mia had never presumed to ask his name, and he, in turn, had never offered it. Their interactions, if they could be called that, were limited to a brief, almost imperceptible nod if their paths happened to cross. She leaving her offering, he approaching the bench from whatever unseen place he spent his nights. Or, on rare occasions, a fleeting moment of direct eye contact that seemed to speak volumes, yet articulated nothing concrete. Her co-workers, initially fueled by a mix of curiosity and concern, had long ago settled into a predictable pattern of weary amusement, mild exasperation, or outright, if usually muttered, disapproval. "She's just encouraging him, you know," Janelle, one of the more pragmatic and outspoken counterstaff, would often state, not quite under her breath, loud enough for Mia to overhear as she kneaded dough or piped intricate designs. Wasting perfectly good, saleable product on someone who'll probably never appreciate it, or worse, just sells it. It's a health code violation waiting to happen, if you ask me. Mark, the burly, perpetually flour-dusted early morning bread baker, would frequently add, his face set in lines of grumpy, world-weary pragmatism. And what if he gets aggressive? One of these days he'll cause trouble. Try to come inside when it's busy. You'll see, Mia. You're too soft. Even her own mother, normally Mia's staunchest and most uncritical supporter, had expressed gentle, loving concern during their weekly phone calls. "Mia, darling, it's truly wonderful that you're so compassionate, so kind-hearted. But are you absolutely sure this is wise? There are established organizations, you know, proper channels for this sort of thing. Shelters, food banks." 4 months prior to the wedding, the Sunrise Hearth had been acquired by a small, ambitious, upscale bakery chain aiming to expand its footprint. The new regional manager, a Mr. Henderson, was the epitome of corporate polish and bottom-line focus, his language peppered with terms like synergy and brand optimization. During Mia's first formal performance review under the new regime, conducted in a sterile, borrowed office space, he'd broached the subject of her daily ritual with a practiced, almost surgical delicacy, his tone carefully, studiously neutral. "Ms. Hayes," he'd begun, steepling his fingers, "your, shall we say, extracurricular charitable endeavors. They're admirable, of course, on a personal level. Commendable. However," a slight pause, "we've received a few comments from patrons. Some individuals, it seems, feel a bit uneasy. Perhaps," he'd suggested, his smile never quite reaching his eyes, "your evident generosity could be channeled through a more formal, recognized structure. A corporate-approved donation to a registered homeless shelter, for instance. Good for community relations, you see." Mia had nodded, offered a polite, non-committal smile that revealed nothing of her inner resolve, and had changed absolutely nothing about her deeply ingrained ritual. She simply adjusted her already early schedule, setting her alarm for 3:45 a.m., ensuring her offering was placed on the bench in the deepest darkness, long before the first hesitant rays of sun kissed the horizon, let alone before the first employee, even Mark, arrived. She had believed no one had noticed the subtle shift in her routine until a new barista, a young man barely out of high school, full of youthful self-assurance and a distinct lack of discretion, spotted her returning from her pre-dawn mission just the previous week. "Dude, she's been feeding that homeless guy for like ages," the barista had whispered, not nearly quietly enough, to a regular customer waiting for his latte, his voice carrying easily in the otherwise quiet early morning bakery. "Every single day, rain or shine. Can you even believe it?" The customer, a woman impeccably dressed in expensive athleisure wear, her expression one of carefully cultivated pity mixed with a subtle condescension, had shaken her head slowly. "Poor dear," she'd murmured, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Think she's actually making a difference. Some people, you know, they just can't be helped. It's a shame, really." Mia had pretended not to hear, her hands moving with automatic, practiced grace as she meticulously crimped the edges of a delicate apple galette. But the words, so casual, so dismissive, so utterly lacking in understanding, had stung more than she cared to admit. Not because she craved validation or applause, her actions were never, ever about that, but because they couldn't, or perhaps more accurately wouldn't, see what she saw. Not a problem to be managed or avoided, not a statistic to be quoted, not that homeless guy to be pitied or scorned, but a human being. A fellow soul deserving of a small, consistent, unwavering kindness. A flicker of dignity, a moment of normalcy, in a world that seemed determined to offer him neither. "You've always had a heart far too big for your own good, Mia, love," her fiancé, Liam O'Connell, had told her on more than one occasion, his strong, capable firefighter's arms wrapped around her in a comforting embrace. He, more than anyone else on the planet, understood the deep, quiet currents of her compassion. His own life, his chosen profession as a paramedic, was a daily testament to quiet acts of service, the unseen, unheralded moments of profound human connection and compassion that rarely made headlines but formed the very bedrock of a decent, functioning society. His days were filled with urgency, with the raw, unfiltered, often brutal realities of human suffering and vulnerability. He'd seen firsthand, countless times, how easily people could slip through the cracks, how quickly they could become invisible to the world around them. "Always picking up strays, Mia," he'd teased her gently, his smile warm and full of love. "Whether they've got 2 legs or 4. Always giving away what you've earned, even when you can barely afford it yourself." Mia knew, with a certainty that settled deep within her bones, a foundational belief that shaped her worldview, that giving wasn't about recognition, or even about making a difference in some grand, measurable, quantifiable way. It was about connection. It was about the simple, profound act of acknowledging the shared humanity that bound them all, especially those whom society, in its relentless pursuit of progress and perfection, preferred to walk past, to render unseen, to forget. She had never truly spoken, in the conventional sense, with the elderly man from the bench. Theirs was a silent contract, an unspoken covenant of mutual, distant respect. But one bleak, unusually cold, and relentlessly rainy December morning, the kind of day where the damp chill seeped into your bones and stubbornly refused to leave, she'd found him huddled on the bench, shivering visibly, despite the inadequate protection of his thick, tattered coat. The usual offering of a pastry and a hot coffee suddenly felt woefully inadequate, a pitiful gesture against such elemental misery. Without a second thought, without hesitation, Mia had unwrapped the worn, incredibly soft alpaca wool scarf from her own neck, a cherished gift from her late grandmother, imbued with memories and warmth, and had laid it gently, reverently, beside his breakfast. The next day, the scarf was gone. In its place, tucked carefully under the now empty coffee cup, was her own handwritten note from the day before, the one wishing him a peaceful day. On the back of that small piece of paper, scrawled in a shaky, faint, but surprisingly neat pencil script, were 5 simple, powerful words. "Thank you for seeing me." Mia had carefully, almost reverently, folded that note and placed it in the most protected compartment of her wallet. She still carried it with her everywhere. It was a small, tangible talisman, a reminder of the profound impact of simple human connection. Sometimes, when the world felt particularly cold or indifferent, when the casual cruelty of strangers or the weary cynicism of her own colleagues pressed in on her, threatening to erode her resolve, she would take it out, unfold its creases, and read those 5 words. "Thank you for seeing me." It was, invariably, enough. As her wedding day had approached, a day she'd dreamed of with a quiet, hopeful joy, Mia had, of course, ordered her magnificent tiered wedding cake from the Sunrise Hearth, insisting on paying the full retail price, much to Mr. Henderson's mild, professionally concealed surprise. She'd invited all her colleagues from the bakery, even the perpetually skeptical Janelle and the grumpy Mark. Liam had chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You'd invite the whole damn neighborhood if you could, wouldn't you, love?" He understood her deeply inclusive nature. It was one of the myriad, unquantifiable reasons he loved her so fiercely. 2 days before the wedding, an unmarked plain white hand-delivered envelope had arrived at the Saint. Michael's church office, addressed with surprising formality to the bride, Ms. Amelia Hayes. Inside, on a piece of simple, inexpensive cardstock, was a neatly penned message, the handwriting elegant, yet slightly tremulous. "Wishing you and your husband a lifetime of shared joy and abundant happiness. Your consistent kindness has been a beacon in a long darkness. Tomorrow, if I may be so bold, I will come. Not for cake, nor for celebration, but to honor a debt I can never truly repay." There was no signature, no return address, nothing to indicate its origin. The handwriting itself stirred a faint, elusive sense of recognition in Mia, a certain old-fashioned precision and clarity, but she couldn't quite place it. A distant, forgotten relative? One of Liam's many paramedic colleagues or firefighter buddies, known for their sometimes eccentric gestures? It was a minor, intriguing puzzle, a gentle mystery that was quickly overshadowed by the joyous, chaotic flurry of last-minute wedding preparations. Now, standing in the hushed, expectant silence of the church foyer, the collective weight of 12 United States Marines' solemn, unwavering regard pressing in on her, Mia looked at Thomas Asher, the man she'd known only as a silent, enigmatic presence on a park bench at the edge of her world. A hero? Sustained by her humble offerings of pastries and coffee? It felt surreal, impossible, like a scene from a movie, not her actual wedding day. Captain Thorne's voice, steady, measured, and unwavering, cut through her swirling confusion, anchoring her back to the incredible reality unfolding before her. "Sergeant Thomas Asher," he declared, each word imbued with gravitas, served 3 distinguished and arduous tours of duty in Afghanistan with the 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. During a devastating enemy ambush in the notoriously dangerous Helmand Province in the spring of 2010, his platoon was pinned down, taking extremely heavy and accurate fire from multiple concealed positions. Sergeant Asher, despite sustaining significant shrapnel wounds to his left leg and right shoulder early in the engagement, repeatedly and without regard for his own safety, exposed himself to intense enemy fire to drag 7 critically wounded Marines from the kill zone to a position of relative cover. 7 men, 7 sons, brothers, husbands, who are alive today, who have families, who have lived to see their children grow, solely because of his extraordinary courage and selfless actions on that day. A collective gasp, a soft, sibilant wave of shock and disbelief, rippled through the assembled guests. Those who mere moments before had whispered with disdain, who had averted their eyes in discomfort or judgment, now stared, their faces a stark, compelling tableau of disbelief, dawning understanding, and a rapidly encroaching, deeply uncomfortable shame. Another Marine, younger than Thorne, his uniform equally immaculate, with the name Ramirez emblazoned on his chest, stepped forward with military precision. He held a velvet-lined shadow box. Inside, displayed against a backdrop of faded royal blue velvet, was a Purple Heart, its ribbon stark against the dark fabric, a silver star, the nation's 3rd highest award for valor, its metallic sheen catching the light, and a single dog-eared, slightly faded photograph. The photo depicted a much younger, grittier, almost unrecognizable Thomas Asher, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, etched with exhaustion, but an unyielding, fierce resolution. He was half carrying, half dragging another Marine, whose uniform was dark with blood, through a dusty, smoke-filled, war-torn landscape littered with debris. In the hazy background, barely discernible through the acrid smoke of battle, was another figure, younger still, slighter in build, but unmistakably a youthful Captain Thorne. "Sergeant Asher," Captain Thorne explained, his voice now thick with an emotion he made no attempt to conceal, a raw honesty that resonated through the silent church. "Carried me," his platoon commander, nearly 500 hellish meters under sustained, brutal machine gun and RPG fire after I took multiple rounds to both legs and was unable to move. He then returned, under that same unrelenting fire, for 6 more of our wounded brothers. He steadfastly refused medevac for himself, despite his own significant injuries, until every single one of his wounded men was clear of the immediate danger and receiving aid. His actions that day were far above and beyond the call of duty. The Silver Star. Thorne paused, his gaze finding Tom Asher's, a look of profound, shared history passing between them. He never officially claimed it. He disappeared, went off the grid entirely, before the formal presentation ceremony could be arranged. Thorne drew a deep, steadying breath, his gaze sweeping over the stunned, now utterly silent faces of the wedding guests, then returning to Mia, a profound, almost reverent respect shining in his eyes. After my own lengthy recovery, I, along with several others from our unit whose lives he saved, tried desperately to find him. For years we searched. We owed him everything, our lives, our futures. But it was as if he'd vanished from the very face of the earth, leaving no trace. He gestured, a subtle, respectful inclination of his head, towards Tom Asher, whose weathered face was now a stoic mask of carefully controlled endurance, though Mia, standing so close, could see the almost imperceptible tremor in his hands, the sheen of unshed tears in his ancient eyes. "We later learned," Thorne continued, his voice dropping slightly, "that after a devastating, unimaginable personal tragedy in 2016, the sudden violent loss of his entire family, his beloved wife and young daughter, in an accident caused by a drunk driver. Sergeant Asher chose to withdraw completely from the world he knew. He couldn't bear the accolades, the hollow label of hero, when he felt so profoundly that he'd failed in his most important duty, to protect his own. He relinquished his home, his military benefits, his pension, everything. He wanted, more than anything, to be invisible, to fade into the background noise of society. Mia's carefully applied waterproof mascara was by now a completely lost cause. Tears, hot and unrestrained, streamed freely down her cheeks, carving clean pathways through her foundation, dripping onto the delicate lace of her gown. Liam, her steadfast Liam, was suddenly, blessedly beside her, his hand a warm, comforting, anchoring weight on her arm. He looked at Tom Asher, not with pity, but with an expression of profound awe, deep compassion, and a shared understanding of trauma that only those who have witnessed the raw edges of life and death can truly possess. I never knew," Mia whispered, her voice choked, fragmented. "I had no idea." Tom Asher finally fully met her gaze. A ghost of a smile, hesitant and fragile, touched his lips, briefly transforming the harsh lines of his face. "That, Miss Mia," he said, his voice still raspy but clearer now, "was rather the entire point. I didn't want to be thanked for just doing my duty. And after my Sarah and my little Lily were gone." His voice cracked, the carefully constructed wall of his composure momentarily crumbling, revealing the raw, unhealed grief beneath. He took a shaky, visibly difficult breath. "I couldn't stand the pity, or the hero worship. It all felt like a cruel, hollow mockery." He paused, gathering himself. "But you, Miss Mia, you never asked. You never pried. You never judged. You You saw a man who was hungry, who was cold, who was alone. You gave me a cup of coffee, a warm pastry. Those little notes you left. A flicker of warmth, of genuine light entered his eyes. Sometimes they were the only kind words I heard all week. Sometimes they were the only thing that got me through the day. A small, simple reason to face another morning. The 12 Marines had subtly, almost imperceptibly, rearranged themselves. Their precise formation now constituted a formal honor guard, 2 perfect lines leading from where Mia stood towards the distant flower-decked altar. Captain Thorne addressed the congregation again, his voice resonating with a quiet, unshakable authority. Ms. Hayes never knew she was aiding a decorated war hero. She simply saw a fellow human being in need and acted out of pure, unadulterated compassion, day after day, year after year, without fanfare, without expectation of reward, without seeking any recognition whatsoever. In the Marine Corps, we have a creed we live by, semper fidelis, always faithful. We also live by another equally sacred, unspoken principle. Never, ever leave a Marine behind. His gaze, sharp and penetrating, swept the room, lingering for a noticeable moment on those guests whose earlier discomfort and disdain had been so palpable. Amelia Hayes, he declared, his voice ringing with conviction, who has never worn a military uniform a day in her life, understood that fundamental principle in a way that humbles many of us who have. One of Mia's bridesmaids, Chloe, her best friend since childhood, stepped forward impulsively, tears streaming down her own face, her carefully applied makeup forgotten. I work with Mia at the Sunrise Hearth, she said, her voice trembling but clear. She comes in extra early every single morning, every day. She bakes those extra pastries herself, often using her own ingredients, dipping into her own pocket if we're running low on something special she thinks he would like. She never told us, never said a single word about why. Janelle, the usually cynical counterstaffer, looked utterly horrified, her face pale, her mouth slightly agape. Mark, the grumpy bread baker, was staring intently at his polished shoes, a telltale flush of crimson creeping up his neck from under his collar. The well-dressed customer from the bakery, the one who had so casually pitied Mia's supposed naivete, now looked profoundly, visibly mortified, her gaze fixed on the floor. Tom Asher turned back to Mia, his weathered, calloused hands gently, hesitantly taking hers. They were trembling, but his grip when it came was surprisingly firm, grounding. "The letter I sent to the church," he said softly, his voice for her ears alone. "That was from me. I overheard you talking to a customer about your upcoming wedding a few weeks ago, mentioning the date and the church. I hope you don't mind. I have an old friend from the service, Gunnery Sergeant Miller. He retired out here in San Diego. I finally found the courage to reach out to him. He helped me get this suit. He's the one who, after I told him about you, contacted Captain Thorne and the others. They put all of this together." He gestured vaguely, almost shyly, at the formidable line of Marines. "I only wanted to come today to thank you properly in person, to give you the only gift I truly had left to offer, my presence, my truth, and my profound, undying gratitude." Mia smiled through her own unabated tears, her heart feeling too large, too full, too suffused with an almost unbearable mix of emotions to be contained within her chest. "Tom," she said, trying out his name, letting it settle on her tongue, feeling its significance. "This is the most beautiful, the most incredible, the most meaningful wedding gift imaginable." Liam, his own eyes suspiciously bright, his arm still a steadfast presence around Mia's waist, stepped forward, extending his hand, open and welcoming, to Tom Asher. "Sergeant Asher, sir," he said, his voice resonating with a deep, genuine respect that mirrored the Marines. I'm Liam O'Connell, and I am, without a shadow of a doubt, the luckiest man in the world today. It would be a profound and distinct honor, sir, if you would join our families in the front pew. And perhaps, he glanced at Mia, a silent, questioning arch to his brow, and she nodded enthusiastically, her tear-filled eyes shining. Perhaps you would consider doing me and Mia the great honor of walking her down the aisle with her father. A wave of emotion, raw, powerful, and long suppressed, finally broke through Tom Asher's carefully constructed stoic reserve. A single tear, then another, traced a path down his weathered cheek, disappearing into the silver stubble on his jaw. He nodded, a series of small, jerky movements, seemingly unable to speak, and squeezed Mia's hand tightly. Mrs. Albright, the unflappable wedding planner, her meticulously detailed schedule now in utter tatters, her face a comical mask of bewilderment, dawning awe, and grudging admiration, simply threw her hands up in a gesture of complete surrender and utter bemusement. The church organist, after a long moment of frozen, stunned silence, seemed to recover his senses and with a sudden, triumphant flourish, began the majestic strains of the processional music, albeit a little shakily at first. And so, as Mia, flanked by her tearful, proud father on one side and a deeply moved, visibly trembling Sergeant Thomas Asher, USMC, retired, on the other, began her walk down the aisle, past 12 impeccably straight, saluting United States Marines and a congregation forever changed by what they had just witnessed, she knew with absolute certainty that this was more than just a wedding. It was a testament to the quiet, persistent, often unseen power of unwavering kindness, a profound reminder that true heroes often walk among us, unrecognized, their battles private, their victories unsung, until a simple, unassuming act of human compassion shines an unexpected, illuminating light into the deepest, most hidden shadows. The honeymoon, a blissful, sun-drenched, restorative week spent in a sleepy, picturesque coastal town in Northern California, was everything Mia had dreamed of. Yet her thoughts, in quiet moments, often drifted back to Sergeant Thomas Asher and the extraordinary, life-altering events of her wedding day. Liam, ever perceptive, ever attuned to the nuances of her heart, understood without her needing to voice it. "You're already planning something big, aren't you?" he asked one evening as they sat on their little balcony, watching the sunset paint the vast Pacific sky in breathtaking hues of orange, pink, and violet. Mia smiled, a soft, determined curve of her lips. "The wedding gift money. We always said we wanted to do something truly meaningful with it, something that would last." Upon their return to San Diego, invigorated and resolute, Mia did not go back to the familiar comforts and routines of the Sunrise hearth. Mr. Henderson, to his credit, had been surprisingly understanding, almost gracious, even offering a glowing, if somewhat bewildered, letter of reference. Instead, Mia and Liam pooled their generous wedding gift money, cashed in a significant portion of their personal savings, and began the arduous, often frustrating, but ultimately rewarding process of establishing the Haven Project. It was envisioned not as a traditional shelter, with its often impersonal rules and crowded spaces, but as a small, warm, welcoming daytime drop-in center. A place where homeless individuals, particularly veterans, could come for a hot, nutritious breakfast, a decent cup of freshly brewed coffee, access to vital resources like internet and phone charging, assistance with navigating social services, and most importantly, a moment of dignity, respect, and genuine human connection, free from judgment, bureaucracy, or intrusive, demanding questions. The reality of bringing this vision to life was far from the romantic ideal. Finding a suitable, accessible, and affordable location in San Diego's competitive real estate market took months of relentless searching and negotiation. Navigating the labyrinthine complexities of city permits, zoning laws, and health codes proved to be a bureaucratic nightmare, testing Mia's patience and resolve on numerous occasions. There were days, many of them, when Mia felt utterly overwhelmed, daunted by the sheer scale of the undertaking, wondering if they'd foolishly taken on far too much. Funding, predictably, was a constant nagging worry, the need for donations and grants a relentless pressure. Volunteers, though initially enthusiastic, were sometimes unreliable, their well-intentioned commitments often falling victim to the demands of their own lives. Some of the individuals they were trying to help were, understandably, challenging, their deep-seated trauma manifesting as anger, suspicion, or a profound, heartbreaking distrust that was difficult to penetrate. Janelle, the formerly cynical counterstaffer from the Sunrise Hearth, surprisingly, was one of the Haven Project's first and most dedicated full-time volunteers, her earlier skepticism entirely replaced by a quiet, fierce, almost maternal determination. "I was such an idiot, Mia," she confessed one early morning, vigorously scrubbing down tables at the Haven Project before their 6 a.m. opening, her voice thick with remorse. "I was so judgmental. I didn't see. I didn't want to see." Mark, the grumpy baker, while not volunteering his time, began regularly donating unsold day-old bread and pastries, his gruff exterior barely concealing a newfound, grudging respect for Mia's endeavors. Sergeant Thomas Asher didn't appear at the Haven Project immediately after the wedding. Captain Thorne had explained to Mia and Liam, in a follow-up call filled with gratitude, that Tom was finally, with the considerable, unwavering support of his old unit and the often criticized, but in this case, responsive Veterans Affairs system, accessing the comprehensive medical care, including specialized trauma counseling that he so desperately needed and had avoided for so long. The Marines, true to their code, had helped him secure temporary dignified housing in a veterans' transitional facility, and were slowly, patiently, reintroducing him to the supportive embrace of the military community he had abandoned years before in his grief and despair. But each month, as regular as the tide, Mia would receive a postcard. They arrived from different, often unexpected locations: a serene national park in Utah, a small, unassuming town in rural Oregon, a dramatic coastal viewpoint in Big Sur. Each postcard bore the same simple, poignant message, written in that familiar, neat, slightly shaky script that Mia now cherished. "Every breakfast is still a salute. Thank you for everything. T.A." On the first anniversary of their wedding, a day filled with quiet joy and reflection for Mia and Liam, they arrived at the Haven Project to find Captain Thorne and the 11 other Marines from their wedding day waiting for them on the doorstep. This time, they were in civilian clothes, relaxed and smiling, each holding a single, perfect almond croissant from a renowned local artisan bakery. "Figured you two might be too busy saving the world to bake for yourselves today," Thorne said, his eyes crinkling with a warm, genuine grin. He handed Mia a croissant. "We've, taken the liberty of setting up a rotating volunteer schedule amongst ourselves. This honor, this project you've started, it's not one we'll allow to be forgotten or to falter. Consider us part of your permanent, if somewhat unofficial, staff." The other Marines nodded in agreement, their expressions earnest and committed. Word about the Haven Project, despite Mia's deliberate avoidance of publicity, spread quietly but persistently through San Diego's tight-knit veteran community, and among overworked social workers constantly seeking safe havens for their clients. It became known as a place of genuine welcome, a sanctuary of respect. There were no intrusive photographers documenting their daily work, no glossy press releases trumpeting their modest mission, just a simple hand-carved wooden sign above the unpretentious entrance. The Haven Project. A little kindness goes a long way. All are welcome. Mia kept Tom's original precious penciled note. Thank you for seeing me, framed and hung in a place of honor behind the simple, functional serving counter where coffee and breakfast were dispensed each morning. Below it, she'd carefully added her own hand-lettered message on a small laminated card. Everyone who sits at this table has a story. Every story deserves to be heard with respect. Nearly 18 months into the Haven Project's operation, a persistent young reporter from a local news station, having heard compelling whispers of their unique work through community channels, showed up unannounced, camera crew in tow, requesting an on-air interview. Mia, true to her nature, politely but firmly declined for herself and for Liam, instead suggesting, with gentle persuasion, that they speak with some of the veterans who frequented the space daily, if, and only if, they were willing and comfortable sharing their stories. This isn't about me or about us, she explained patiently to the slightly surprised and initially frustrated reporter. It's about them. It's about remembering the people we, as a society, too easily forget. It's about acknowledging the invisible souls all around us, every single day. There were still undeniably hard days. Days when essential supplies ran precariously low, when a crucial piece of equipment broke down, when a key volunteer called in sick at the last minute, when the sheer, overwhelming weight of the pervasive need in their community felt crushing, almost unbearable. On those particularly challenging mornings, when exhaustion gnawed at her bones and doubt whispered insidious suggestions in her ear, Mia would close her eyes for a brief moment, take a deep, steadying breath, and deliberately, vividly picture her wedding day. The hushed, reverent awe of the initially judgmental guests, the profound, heartbreaking dignity etched on Sergeant Thomas Asher's weathered face as he stood beside her, and the unwavering, solemn, deeply respectful salute of 12 United States Marines, all offered for a simple, consistent, unassuming act of daily kindness, an act performed without agenda or expectation. It was, invariably, all the motivation she needed to turn the key in the lock, switch on the industrial coffee machine, and prepare, with renewed resolve, for another day of quiet service. Liam, her rock, her partner in all things, understood completely, without needing words. As a paramedic, he knew intimately that heroism wasn't always about dramatic, siren-blaring life-or-death rescues or bravely charging into burning buildings. Sometimes, he'd often tell her, his arm draped comfortingly around her shoulders as they reviewed the day's challenges. Heroism was quieter, less visible, almost mundane. It was the steady, unglamorous, often thankless consistency of simply showing up, day after day, offering a helping hand, a listening ear, a moment of genuine human grace, with no expectation of recognition, reward, or applause. One cool evening, as they were locking up the Haven Project after a particularly long and demanding day, tired but imbued with a deep sense of satisfaction, Liam pulled Mia close, his chin resting on the top of her head. "You know," he said, his voice soft, reflective, "when I married you, Mia, I thought I was just getting an incredibly amazing, compassionate wife. Turns out," he chuckled softly, "I got a whole squad of highly dedicated Marines, a rapidly growing extended family of incredible, resilient veterans, and a daily humbling masterclass in what it truly means to be a good, decent human being in this often crazy world." Mia smiled, a tired but contented smile, leaning her head against his strong, familiar shoulder. "The very best kind of family," she murmured, her voice filled with a quiet warmth. "The kind you choose, with open eyes and an open heart, and the kind that sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, chooses you right back, just as fiercely." She often found herself thinking of a poignant phrase she'd once read, tucked away in an old book, something about how the world's greatest, truest heroes often eat their meals alone, unseen and unacknowledged. Mia Hayes, through her quiet, unwavering actions, had simply decided that at her table, at the Haven Project, no one who sought a little warmth, a little sustenance, a little human kindness would ever have to. For in every deliberate act of truly seeing another human being, seeing beyond the grime, the despair, the societal labels, lay the potent, transformative potential to not just preserve a life, but to help rediscover a lost soul, and perhaps, just perhaps, even to remind a few good, forgotten soldiers that some of life's most important battles are fought not with weapons and armor, but with unwavering compassion and stubborn, persistent hope, and that the truest, most meaningful salutes are sometimes earned not by those in decorated uniforms, but by those who, without ever wearing one, understood its deepest, most honorable code of unwavering faithfulness and selfless service all the same. The homeless individuals we pass on bustling city streets, the quiet, often disregarded figures on park benches. They are not, and never should be, defined solely by their current, often desperate circumstances. They are former teachers who shaped young minds, nurses who saved lives, artists who created beauty, soldiers who defended freedoms, people with rich pasts, with complex stories, with an inherent, inviolable worth. To live with kindness, Mia knew with every fiber of her being, was not for accolades or public recognition, but for the quiet, persistent, sacred hope that one day you might witness the world pause, bow its collective head, just for a fleeting, precious moment, in acknowledgement of something good and true you did when no one important was watching, for someone everyone else in their busy lives had long since overlooked. And in that sacred, hopeful possibility, Mia Hayes found a profound, sustaining grace, a grace deep and wide enough to fuel a lifetime of quiet, meaningful service. Wonderful. Now that you've followed the emotional journey of Mia and Sergeant Asher, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Has a small act of kindness ever made a profound impact on you? Or have you witnessed something similar that stayed with you? Were you surprised by Sergeant Asher's true identity? Let us know your answers and how this story made you feel in the comments below. If stories like this one, celebrating the quiet power of compassion and the unexpected heroes among us, resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on more meaningful content.